Well, guys, Jean Bisson has unknowingly thrown down the gauntlet. With the Clockwork Talons as a trophy, we'd be fools not to participate in his lumberjack games. Fortunately, due to frequent avalanches, a log chopping guy was frozen in a wall of ice not far from our position.
Oh yeah, fortunately.
You're in charge of acquiring the book. I'm sure it will prove invaluable. Now, we're all aware that Arpeggio's blip is coming to pick up another battery. To sneak aboard without incident, I'd recommend we pull a Trojan
diagram eating one battery.
Away inside the battery. However, the location of the device is still a mystery. We need some inside information. So, working together, you two will infiltrate the Moose Guard's secret RC combat club.
What the hell?
Those guys all work at the lighthouse. If you win the battle, I'm sure they'll talk. Despite his antique mind, Jean Bisson's no fool. To keep tabs on him, we'll need to bug his house, steal the radio tags off local bears, and then jerry-rig them into a sensor array.
The fuck is this plan?
Set of tasks, and that blip's on its way. Let's get to work.
I followed none of that. So we're trying to enter the log chopping competition to get the thing, and we need to bug his house for reasons, and we need to enter some kind of RC car thing. I don't see how all this is related. Maybe I'm just stupid. I was not paying attention properly, but alright. So anyway, we all know what this is. This is going to be the post-commentary, wandering around and getting bottles section. I don't really have a long, coherent story to talk about this time, unfortunately. Nothing came to mind, and I didn't have any major ones that were suggested, so it's just going to be a bunch of unrelated stuff, and we'll make it work somehow. So I will probably be back when that's done, assuming that this doesn't take forever. And here we go. We have 32 minutes and 46 seconds of nothing to fill. Because, as I mentioned, I don't really have any major subjects to go into this time. In some of these previous ones, I was able to ramble on one particular thing because it was an ongoing, coherent thought. And I feel like I've told most of the major stories that I can really get into at this point. There's other stuff that's happened in my life that I could probably go on long rants about for a period of time if I needed to, but none are really coming to mind aside from like overly personal stuff, so I think we're going to take a break from that one and just kind of go into answering questions mode. And I don't have a whole lot of questions to answer this time, so I guess just to jump into the ones I have here. Some of these are just obviously joke questions, but I'll respond to them anyway. Borax says, the effects of memes on U.S. politics. I don't follow anything really with politics, so I couldn't really say. All I know is that during the elections, there was that whole kerfuffle with Hillary saying that Pepe was a white supremacist symbol, which I'm pretty sure it wasn't beforehand, but then now that that was said, it kind of ironically became one. I still don't understand Pepe. I feel like there's maybe not much to understand, but it's just one of those things that kind of showed up, and I think had been around for a long time, and I never really understood where it came from or what it meant, but I guess it's just the main one is just the depressed looking face, and you just kind of post it when you feel like the face applies to the situation. I don't freaking know. There was an episode of Animated Atrocities by Mr. Enter, where he was reviewing, what was it, Big Mouth, that Netflix original show, and he said that the character's face looks like a certain non-advertiser friendly frog, and he was pretty accurate about that, and that's an interesting way to put it, because I don't think Pepe was originally a problem, but now that he's apparently a white supremacist symbol, I guess he would be. I don't fucking know. The whole thing is stupid. and then I know that Trump, like, tweets a bunch of stupid shit, and people always make fun of it. There was the whole Covfefe thing, which I don't even know what that was supposed to mean. Like, I don't remember the original context of that. He just... Covfefe apparently was a word. And then there was that stupid picture of him, like, posing behind a gigantic table of McDonald's that he bought for, like, various government workers. And it's like, oh boy. Like, people made fun of that one, kind of rightfully so. But, I don't know. I've been in this... I guess this is a... like, tangent I can go into briefly. Just the fact that I've basically managed to avoid most political stuff, and I don't say that as necessarily like a positive thing, because I recognize that it is important to know, like, the state that your country is in, and I mean, even to that extent, like, what the rest of the world is doing, and not just being completely isolationist. But, I don't know, I never want to bother with it. To me, the entire... like, when I was in school, the concept of social studies was always ridiculously boring to me, and that encompasses learning about history, but also learning about how the government works, and just, like, the inner workings of society in general. It's kind of a broad subject, honestly, but I kind of put all of that under the same heading of, like, just boring, bureaucratic... don't give a shit. Like I said, I'm not saying this to, like, brag about it. Like, there's some people who are like, I don't follow politics and I don't ever want to, and I'm proud of it. Like, I'm not really that way. I don't follow them, but I don't say that makes me a better person for it. It makes me more ignorant. But all I know is a lot of people hate Trump, and a lot of people support him, and the people who do support him are usually looked at as being idiots, and the people who hate him are, like, quote-unquote the right ones, because that's what you see the most of on the internet. But the internet is also very left-leaning in a lot of ways. So as for, like, the whole thing with the wall, like, I honestly thought that was a joke when I first heard about it. I didn't even realize that was an actual thing that he said, but I guess it was. And then, like, government shut down because he threw a temper tantrum because the wall didn't get made, or, like, that's what people were saying happened, and that's, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know any of this shit, so whatever. I'm not going to talk about Trump. He has no real effect on my life. I mean, obviously he does, because he influences a lot of stuff, but on a personal level, I don't really care. And this is, not related to that subject, but it reminded me of it, and it's another random tangent I could get into. And since we've already hit the one of the major ones, which is never talk about politics, never talk about religion either. That's another thing. It's always been a weird subject with me, because I grew up in a non-religious household, basically, but in a sense that, like, I always still kind of considered Christianity, like, the default. And I guess you could just say that's true for the US in general. Maybe it depends on where you live. But, it's like, my family believes in God, and they would go to church occasionally. Not, like, it was, like, I know there's some people who are like, they go on Christmas and Easter and that's it. Like, my family didn't do that, but I remember, like, when I was really little, I would go with, and then they just kind of stopped. And that kind of, like, started up again way later, when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and the kids would go, but I wouldn't, because I just didn't really care. The point I'm trying to get to here is that I always felt guilty for not being religious, if that makes any sense. It's never that I was bullied into it, or, like, I know there's some people have had really terrible experiences with, like, family basically forcing it on them, or society as a whole, like, treating you as an outcast because you believe one thing and you're supposed to believe this. That never happened to me, so, like, I'm not again, I'm not complaining, and I'm not, like, saying, like, I'm in a bad situation, but I did always feel like... I guess my way of looking at things is... I see no proof that anything in the Bible happened. Like, some of it I'm sure is historical, and then when you get into the more, like, spiritual, magical stuff, like, that's where I basically draw the line. Like, I don't feel like any of that stuff ever happened. But at the same time, I do feel like the universe is a crazy place, and everything works down to, like, this, like, nanoscopic scale. Like, when you really think about life in general, it's like, it's crazy how all this kind of comes together to make a living being and a consciousness. And did that happen accidentally? I don't know. That's why it's like, you have the whole creationism versus, like, evolution thing. Like, sure, why couldn't there be a god that set stuff into motion and then it kind of took care of itself and evolution happened? Like, why can't you have both? Like, I don't know. So, I guess, like, my main... I've said this before, my outlook on the subject is that no religion is necessarily right, but we don't have all the answers as a species, and saying that there's no higher power is kind of... like, you don't know that. There could be. So that's always been my outlook, and I feel like that's not a good enough outlook to have. Like... it's always that, like, don't be on the fence, pick a side, but it's like, I kind of like being on the fence. I feel like we don't know, and that's my response. Like, but getting back to, like, the me feeling guilty about it, like, I've always kind of had the opinion that, generally, if you do have a faith that you follow, in general, you're gonna be, like, a nicer person. And there's obviously exceptions to this. Like, you have the extremists who, like, take things way too far and they belittle anyone who isn't the same as them, and, like, that's not even what the Bible teaches, but they do it anyway, so whatever, I'm not getting into that shit. But, I don't know, it's just, I always felt weird for being agnostic or whatever it is. Like, I kind of in the border between agnostic and atheist, but, like, this is a subject I probably shouldn't even get into, but it's like, I'm not making fun of anybody for being on any side, so whatever, nobody should get offended, hopefully. But, I don't know, there's not really been many times where that ever came up, necessarily, but it's just, it's one of those things that's always kind of in the back of my mind, when the subject comes up. I would just always feel bad for not agreeing with it. I don't know. I've rambled enough on that, so. What was the next thing on here? There's a lot of stuff about Hadoos. I'll get to that later. Then we have, here's one posted by Math Physics Nerd that is a bunch of little stuff that I have no real response to any of it, so I'll just read it anyway. Do you follow or subscribe to any particularly weird video makers? I know a guy making Bioshock for hamsters, an Australian man who makes cheese, and a Japanese guy who makes knives out of basically anything. I know about the person who makes knives. I've not really watched them, but I know Martin sort of does, and I've seen, like, a couple of them. It's interesting, but not anything I really care about. The other two, the Bioshock for hamsters, I have no idea what the hell that's about. But no, I really don't. Like, I don't really have any YouTube subscriptions that are worth noting. Like, let me actually pull up what mine even are. I don't even frickin' know what they would be. So I have Vitamin Datai, who I haven't watched in a long time. Moon Hotel, previously known as Madame Luna, who I haven't watched in like 10 years. Little Karibo, who I haven't watched in like 10 years. Red Supre, who I occasionally watch if they make something I care about, but they usually don't anymore. Martin's channel, just for the sake of it, and then Pop Arena. Pop Arena is a really good channel. If you don't know about it, I know I've mentioned it before. That's the one that he's currently going through every Nickelodeon show and doing kind of like a breakdown, like a history of how the show started, some stories about like the production on it and the impact it had on the channel. It's really interesting if you're into that kind of stuff. He also did reviews of all of the Animorphs books. He's going through Goosebumps. I know he did Doctor Who stuff, but I never watched that. But yeah, that's a really good channel. Those are the only subscriptions I actually have. The other channels I follow are ones that I'll just kind of like there's Vine Sauce, who I watch his stuff when it's a game I like. And then there's basically just other ones that I'll kind of go through periods of like, oh yeah, they exist. Let me look at their channel and see what they've done. So Ashens, I've kind of stopped watching him very often lately, but I do occasionally. Carl Sagan 42 and Grand Pooh Bear, mostly Carl. I watch all of his stuff. I watch some of Pooh's stuff. They're both Mario players. They're really good. What else? I've been into the Sieve gaming and like the hooray, like the ridiculous challenges that he does. But yeah, it's mostly just gaming stuff. I can't really think of any non-gaming channels that I follow. I'm sure there's, like, other than Ashens, I'm sure there's a couple, but there's also Suede. I like his Pokemon anime reviews. Those are good. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, nothing really outrageous, or just like, wow, this channel does really stupid stuff, I'm gonna watch this. Kind of like the Hydraulic Press guy. Like, that was a weird channel that just kind of caught on for a while. But no, none of that really. Then it says, the next part of the post was, any books that come to mind that you've not really talked about reading but you have something to say on. Once again, not really. Big Harry Potter fan. I mean, a lot of people are, so I don't have anything super exciting to say on that subject. I've talked about Fablehaven already. I did like a video kind of going over the basics of that series. I still need to read the next... Fablehaven is 5 books, and then there's a sequel series, Dragon Watch. I read the first one. The second one has come out, but I haven't read it yet. I need to do that. And that author's done other stuff, but I read Beyonders. It was okay, but I didn't love it, and I haven't read any of his other stuff. Not a huge book person overall, though. Other than those, the only series that I remember that I really have read through recently that I enjoy is the Monk series, like the TV show Monk, the detective. There's a book series based off of that. Those are pretty good. They get the characters down rather well. The narrator on those is Natalie. So you're not seeing things from Monk's perspective, because that would probably be pretty hard to write for, but it gets a lot of the character quirks. Sometimes Monk acts a little bit too... like, in the show, he's usually very phobic, but in the books, he's more just detail-oriented, I guess is a way to... Like, he's obsessed with even numbers and, like, things being straight, which he is in the show, too, but the books play that up a lot more than the phobias of stuff. It kind of depends. There were 2 authors, but those are good. I recommend those. I haven't read all of them. I probably should. And other than that, I've never really been... Like, as a kid, I read Animorphs. I didn't read the whole series, but I read the ones that I could. Goosebumps, which is a pile of shit, but I liked it as a kid. And other than that, I usually didn't really read stuff unless I was forced to, and I've gone on rants about various books I had to read for English class, like To the Lighthouse, Beloved, The Tale of Two Cities, The Turn of the Screw. Fuck that book. That book, like, ruined my life. The weird one with the French guy who shot an Arab man and went to jail, which somebody did find. I forget the name of it, though. It was in one of the Mario Kart. I think the Mario Kart 7 video, I talked about it, and it was in the comments, so I don't know, that one was stupid. The only good things that ever came from these was, if we ever had a creative writing exercise that related to the book, and I could kind of, like, make fun of it in the writing, I would sometimes do that. But that didn't come up very often. Like, there was The Great Gatsby, where we did we did like skits for parts of the book, and there was a part where it was a scene with 4 people, and there were only 3 people in my group, so I played 2 of them at once because the main narrator of that book, I think his name was Nick, is really bland and like boring. So I got a plank of wood and I just drew like a stupid face on it, and I just had that be him. And then whenever he had to talk, I would just kind of like move it up and down and be like, "Oh, hey guys, I don't know what's going on." Like, I would just do like this very stupid voice. So that was fun. But yeah, like I said, not really too much to say on books other than that. Like, I could probably think of a couple that I could go on rants about, but I've talked about most of them in streams before, so maybe. And then let's touch upon the most divisive argument, including rage-making... divisive argument-inducing rage-making topic of them all. Which cola is the best one? It's Coke. As far as I'm concerned, Coke is just superior to Pepsi. Like, the stupid thing is it also depends on what form it's in. Because Coke from a can compared to in a bottle compared to from like a fountain drink dispenser are 3 completely different beasts. And same with Pepsi. And so like, and then the thing is there's McDonald's fountain Coke, and then there's fountain Coke from other places, because McDonald's has, like, for some reason, they specifically have, like, a different tasting version of it. And I'm not making this up. This is actually a thing. And this speaks to me and my health habits and how much, like... Also, there's another subject, soda versus pop. I recognize soda as being the, like, correct word, but I always say pop because that's how we called it growing. That's what we called it when I was growing up. But yeah, it speaks to my health habits and the fact that I drink a lot of it because I just am an asshole that way. I grew up basically not ever drinking water unless it was like from a water fountain or. Well, I'm trying to like the only times I'd ever drink water was like that, or if it was like something with a lot of physical activity where you would take a water bottle with you, and even then I would usually have like a Gatorade. So it's like I didn't only drink like pop or whatever, but like I'd have like juice and stuff and that kind of, but like I barely ever drank just plain water, and that has definitely stuck with me into adulthood to a point where like now I recognize the shittiness of that and like the health problems that it causes, but I'm so used to it, I can't really bring myself to drink plain water usually. Like, I'll do it at work, but if we have nothing else in the house to drink and we only have like tap water, I will basically just not drink it and I'll just go thirsty. Like, I don't know. But yeah, like I said, McDonald's Coke has its own taste. And then, like, the can is a little bit different from the plastic bottle, which is also different from the glass bottle. And of those, I haven't actually had it from a can in a while, but I think I usually prefer the can. And if you're comparing Pepsi in a can to Coke in a can, Pepsi is a lot less thick, I guess is the way to put it. Like, Coke has, like, this aftertaste that I enjoy, but it also kind of, like, makes you more thirsty, which defeats the purpose of drinking it. Pepsi doesn't have that problem, but I don't like its aftertaste as much. It feels less... It feels less substantial, I guess is a way to put it. And then that kind of carries over to, like, the fountain variety, where it tastes more watered down to me. So I've never liked Pepsi as much. So I've talked about that for far longer than necessary. So now the Hadoos subject, because that was the only other thing that was really mentioned. It just says, what is the Hadoos tier list from Mustard Pig? And That depends on if we're counting all birds as Hadoos or only pigeons. Because here's the thing with me and Hadoos. I still don't understand what happened to cause me to be obsessed with them. And honestly, the most likely subject, or like the most likely cause, is just the fact that I started calling them Hadoos instead of pigeons because it's a funny word. Because I've actually gone back and looked at like older stuff of mine. I did the Pokemon Black and White, like the new Gen 5 Pokemon discussion video. I called it a thought dump. Where basically I just went through each one of the designs and kind of like shared my thoughts on it. When I got to Pit of, I basically was like, it's generic, it's like a Pidgey crossed with a Starly, like whatever, and then just moved on. Whereas now, I'd just be like, oh my god, Hadoop, best Pokemon! And it's weird how I've just suddenly started caring about them. But, I've explained this a million times, but just to recap again, the way that the way that it even started in the first place was just, one day I was, like, I think I don't remember exactly what sparked it, but, I made a pigeon noise. I was just like, and I think there was like, I had remembered this episode of Sesame Street, and I never really watched that show for the record, but the kids never really did either. But there was like this episode of, I think it's like Play With Me Sesame, which is a really stupid version of it that's not as good. But there was a scene I remember where Bert was trying to make a pigeon noise, and he was just like, "Coo! Coo!" And then Ernie was like, "Whoa!" And I don't know, but I like remember that I just made the noise for whatever reason. And then Martin tried to make the pigeon noise and was like, and I thought it was hilarious, and so I just started, like, I kind of made fun of it a bit, and then it just kind of caught on as, like, okay, then I think I basically said, like, if I ever use a Pit of in a Pokemon game, I need to name it Hadoop now, because that's funny. And then later on in the Heart Gold randomized streams, I needed something to learn Fly, so I caught a Pidgeotto and I called it Hadoop, and then that basically introduced it to the audience. And then of course that turned into the whole, like we were in Dallas doing something in like the it was just some government building. I don't even remember what we were doing specifically, but there was a pigeon, and Aaron was like, look, it's a parking lot Hadoop. And I'm like, is parking lot the adjective for Hadoop now? Like, are there different kinds of Hadoops? And so pigeons became parking lot Hadoops, and then we started calling everything other types of Hadoops, and eventually I kind of got sick of that and just started calling pigeons Hadoops, and other birds were just birds. So if we're getting into the tier list of all the different types of birds, pigeons are on top, then penguins, then other types of like small, cute little like fluffy hoppy birds, so like sparrows and chickadees, that kind of thing. Then I would say birds of prey, because they're cool, so like eagles, hawks, that kind of stuff. Then less interesting common birds like crows, because I don't really care about those very much. And then at the bottom would be like vultures, because they're just kind of gross. So this is not a very extensive list. As for where like pelicans fit in there, pelicans are kind of assholes, so I don't know, like I like the way they look, but I don't like them otherwise, so I don't know where to place those. And then there's like storks, cranes, like those other waterfowl. Ducks are pretty high up. Chickens are actually close up with, like, chickens are under penguins, but I like chickens. They're cute. I agree with Vinny that geese are assholes. So even though geese and ducks are very similar, actually ducks are assholes too, but ducks are still better than geese. Then you get into the more Like, you have, like, the tropical, like, those weird, the ones that have, like, those weird mating rituals that you see on, like, Animal Planet. Like, those are probably above the birds of prey. Then you have kiwis. Kiwis are pretty great. They're up around, like, the chicken penguin level. Ostriches, probably up in that section. I don't really have a tier list. I'm just saying, I like most birds. And that's something that has definitely changed, because as a kid, penguins were my favorite animal by far. I didn't really have a second. Like, I never really thought about it, I guess. And I still like penguins a lot, but they have been dethroned by the pigeons. And the only reason for that is because I started watching, like, I would start paying attention to pigeons more often when I would see them on, like, the side of the road or whatever, and they're hilarious looking. Like, they have these ridiculously tiny heads, and the way they bob their heads when they walk is just amusing. Like, they're so dopey looking, but I love it. They have, like, the big fluffy body, the tiny head, the head bobbing. They also kind of wobble when they walk. Like, they're very unbalanced looking, but, like, at the same time, they, like, I don't know if that's a good way to put it, but they just have, like, these fat little bodies and then these tiny little legs. And of course, the noises they make are pretty great. Like, all the other birds tweet or make annoying sounds, and pigeons are just like, it's a pleasant noise to listen to. So I don't know, I just think they're cute. And I would definitely like to have a pet hoodoo, but I don't know what I would do with it. I don't know what I would do with it. This is something that has come to mind more often than you might think. It's a stupid thing to think about, but like, I'll be on the computer late at night, just, like, browsing YouTube or Facebook or whatever. Like, I don't ever go on Facebook for anything but the Beanie group, but I'll just be, like, on there or going to YouTube, and then I'll just see recommended on the homepage, like, Latte the Pigeon wants cuddles. I'm like, oh, so I gotta watch that now. And so I'll see that, and I'm like, damn it, I want a hoodoo now. They're so soft. And so, in a scenario where I would actually have a pet hoodoo, I still don't know what I would do with it. Like, because I don't like the idea of keeping it in a cage all the time. Now, if I was, like, the Pigeon Man from Hey Arnold, and had, like, the rooftop, like, apiary, I think is the term for it, where they had, like, more space to be in, then that would be fine. But then I would have, like, 50 of them, and then it would be going a little bit too far in some places, and I just, like, people have already made jokes that I just am the pigeon lady from Home Alone 2, and yeah, kinda. I'm not there yet, but one day maybe. So, like, if I had one pigeon, it would be sad, because they like to have companions. And what I've learned from watching all the pigeon videos is that they're like, pigeons are surprisingly smart animals that, like, a lot of people don't think that they are, just because they're all over the place and they eat garbage and whatever. But that's mostly just because of the environment that we created for them. Like, pigeons are actually called rock doves, and they're called that because they used to live on cliffs. And once big cities started being a thing, they kind of adapted to, like, perching on skyscrapers and stuff, because that's a pretty good, like, equivalent. But oh shit, I'm actually coming up on the time here. I thought I had more time. I thought my Hadoop rambling was not gonna last enough, so I was stretching it out. Shit. But no, but yeah, they're smart animals, but they're dumb in the sense that they, if they're raised by people, they think they people. So, like, if you introduce them to other pigeons, they won't be friends with them. So it's like, it has to be under the right circumstances. I don't know. I'll have to ramble about Hadoos more at some point. because I probably have more to say about them. But that'll be it for now. Let's finish up the video. And let's immediately die. So yeah, that was a long one. I haven't recorded the post-commentary yet. I don't know what the hell I'm going to talk about for all that time, and hopefully I'm going to cut some of it out, because there was a lot of aimless wandering in this one. I didn't expect that going into it. This seemed like a relatively straightforward level, but for some reason I just had a hard time finding a lot of those. Any last-minute upgrades I can buy? I'm not going to do anything else in this video. Okay, so that's just the shrinking ability that I already have, but possibly an area of effect. And I never use Bentley, or I never use Murray for anything, but I mean, I did want to get everything, so sure, I guess. Hopefully I'll get enough money to buy the other one at some point. I feel like I've been stealing coins off of enemies like way more often than usual in this one, but I did have to get a lot of them. Anyway, next time will hopefully be more interesting.